The mess hall is just as crowded as it was the day before, but you're less perturbed by the crowd than you had been the day prior. You follow Ray to the same table in the back as yesterday, and you idly wonder if this spot had been claimed as their table. Everyone is sitting in the same spots they had yesterday, the only exception being Annie, who is now sitting on Ladson's lap. "I'll get," Poe says as he sees you two approach, but Finn stands up before he can. "Nope, my turn today," Finn interrupts, and he's gone before you two can even make it to your seats. Ray just giggles as she turns to you and shakes her head. "Boys," you scoff teasingly. "They can be so insufferable sometimes." "Insufferable?" Poe asks you, raising an eyebrow. "Is that your term for polite?" "Potentially," you say with a careless shrug. And he waves at you from across the table as he nibbles on a small piece of fruit, and you just wave back, wiggling your fingers in the air. "Was he good today?" "He was," Ladson says as he plucks his thumb underneath his chin. It's a tiny, subtle gesture negating his sentence, but it's subtle enough that only you're aware of it. You just nod your head forward and raise your eyebrow slightly as you take a sip out of a cup of water in front of you, silently telling him that you would talk about it later. "So, do they always do this?" you ask, turning to Ray. "Do they always insist on getting food for us?" "They do," Ray admits. "Well, someone has to set a good example for Annie here," Poe says as he gestures to him. "You gotta show him how to treat a lady right. Isn't that right, Annie?" Annie just bobs his head up and down, not really paying attention to anything Poe was saying, and his answer is met with a chorus of laughter from the table. Finn brings food back to the table quickly enough, and you and Ray start eating immediately. "So, how was training?" Finn asks. "Did you do that thing?" "You know, I didn't," you tell him, your voice casual. "But I tried, and I think I'm getting closer, and with a little more time, I think I can do it." You glance to the side as your eyes meet Poe's before they drop back to your own plate. "In fact, I know I can." "You will," Ray says encouragingly. "By the end of the week, at least." "Don't rush me," you say in a hushed, excited tone. "I'll get there when I get there. I'm just going to be patient and focus, and when it happens, it happens." You glance up at Ladson, who is staring at you like he's never met you before. You just offer him a weak shrug and keep eating. "So, did you want to share?" Finn asks, turning to you. The rest of the table looks at you curiously, and you shift awkwardly beneath the weight of their combined stares. "I mean," you shrug half-heartedly. "It's not really that good of a story." "I want to hear it," Finn offers. "Me too," Ray says, although you're not quite sure she knows what you're talking about. "Me three," Poe says with a chuckle. "Four!" Annie cries out, simply wanting to jump in on the conversation. You turn to Ladson, waiting for him to cast the final vote. "I don't know. Have I heard this story before?" You put your thumb on your forehead with all of your fingers outstretched before you seal your fingers together and put your hand flat on your chest. "Daddy?" Annie asks, tilting his head to the side. "No," you say quickly. "This was your story, a part of your life in a time long before you had met Kylo Ren." "No, my father." They're all looking at you now, anxious for you to continue, and you take a deep breath in and out as you recall the tale. You tell them the name of a planet with a large trading hub, notorious for back-alley dealings and shady trades. "I was born there," you explain. "My mother died when I was very young. I don't remember her at all. My father always took me wherever he went, and so oftentimes while he was off doing whatever it was that he was doing, I would just stop and talk to people, and I was just a young girl, so they would entertain me, talk to me, and so I learned many languages early on. My father was a big drinker, but we didn't have a lot of money, so he could become very angry when he didn't get his way." You let your voice trail off as you let out a deep sigh. "One day he was trying to buy, I don't know, grog, but he didn't have enough money, and so when I was just shy of 12 years, he sold me to an eclectic trading crew that dabbled in a bit of everything, but mostly, human cargo." "You're serious," Ray murmurs, her forehead creased, and you just smile warily. "It worked out okay, though," you tell her. "I forgot what planet we were on. I've probably blocked most of it out, honestly, but I heard them about to be double-crossed one night when the conspirators were speaking in another language. I let them know, and they decided to keep me on their vessel as an interpreter, and I stayed with them for years until we landed on my academia. The crew had found a rare book that the school wanted, and although they spoke decent basic, they wanted me to interpret for them to make sure they weren't getting swindled. Latson lets out a small laugh, and you know he's heard this part of the story from Sadie's father before. The man negotiating the deal was Sadie's father, you say, turning slightly to Poe, considering he was the only one of them that had actually met Sadie. While he was brokering the trade, he started quizzing me in over a dozen different languages. He told me he was looking for a language tutor for his daughter, Sadie, while she went to school there. I told him I would do it, but I didn't want to be a slave, and I wanted to enroll in school with her. And? Finn asks. You turn to him sharply. You didn't think your tale was all that exciting, but he seemed to be on the edge of his seat. And he's a really nice guy, you tell him. Really nice. He paid a lot of money for both me and the book, and I've been close to Sadie ever since. She's like a sister to me. You turn back to Poe. When Ladson and I got back from Circular Base, he's the one who gave us that house you found us in. As thanks for saving her. That's quite a story, Poe admits. Told you it was worth telling, Finn says. How many years were you working on that ship? Too many, you admit. More good stories? Finn asks, and you cast a look at Annie, who thankfully didn't really seem to be paying attention to your tale. Not fit for children's ears, you tell him, but maybe another time. I think Annie's about ready to head to bed. Isn't that right, Annie? He turns as he looks up at you, looking at you with his great big innocent eyes, and for the first time, they didn't remind you of Kylo. You say goodnight to them and take Annie's hand in yours as you head back to your room. Annie is tired, and he washes up and heads to bed without a fuss. As soon as you finish tucking him in, he is out like a light, and you and Ladson head into the living room to talk. It seems like he's not the only one making friends around here, he says, and you can't help but notice the antagonism in his voice. They're not bad people, you insist, and honestly, I do like it here. I've never seen you make friends this fast, Ladson admits. I've never seen you trust people this fast either. I trusted you and Shane pretty quick, even though I didn't really know you argue, but Ladson just rolls his eyes from side to side as he considers this. Not really, he offers. It wasn't until we were really trapped in that meeting room together that we actually became friends. Fair point, you concede. It's not terrible, he admits. But we've only been here 3 days, and you're already telling them where you came from and your whole history with Kylo Ren. Not my whole history, you argue, and Rey only knows the exact details because she went inside my head. I still think they're using you for something, he tells you with a slight shrug of his shoulders. Okay then, you tell him, clapping both hands loudly against your knees. Good idea. He blinks and shakes his head. What? I'll become friends with them, you explain. Figure out what I can about them, work from the inside out. Meanwhile, you try to befriend Leia with Annie to try to figure out where things stand on the Resistance front. Pretend you care, pretend you want to be involved, pretend you want to help. That way, we know if we're being kept in the loop on everything, or if they really do want us to stay out of their conflict. Ladson tilts his head to the side, considering this. It's not a bad plan, he admits after a long moment. It's not, you say firmly. But really, though, I know you don't understand the Force, but I really felt it today. I was able to turn off my thoughts and just focus like I never have before, and I wasn't even frustrated when I couldn't do it. That's right, Ladson says, recalling the conversation at dinner. What were you trying to do? Levitate, you tell him, but he just narrows his eyes. Levitate? He asks dryly. Right, levitate. Of course. Hey, you snap. You hold your left hand out in front of you, and your staff immediately flies out of its holster and into your hand. Ladson watches this, a bit uncomfortably, waiting for you to make your point. It's matter, you tell him. It's all matter. If I can lift this... You move your right hand a few inches above your left as you move the staff up and down in your open palm. Then I can lift me. I just need time and patience. Ladson just shakes his head. Time and patience? Who am I even talking to? Hey, you were the one who helped practice the Force with me in Kylo's room, you remind him. Yeah, and I watched you make yourself angry again and again to actually be able to do anything, he says. Now you're abandoning that approach and trying to, what, find inner peace? I don't know, you say as you shake your head, but both Leia and Rey say that I have the dark and light inside of me, so I'm giving each a try. As long as they're not brainwashing you, Latson says, and you stick out your tongue at him. Look, I don't want to pretend to understand what's going on or what you're going through, but are you sure you're not trying to overcompensate things just a little bit? You tilt your head to the side. What do you mean? Well, you literally learned how to access the Force through Ren, he explains. He was your teacher, and he taught you the dark side, right? But now you want to forget about him, so you want to just abandon everything he taught you and rush to the light side, so you don't have to depend on him anymore. It's not that simple, you protest, crossing your arms over your chest. Okay, well, maybe there's some kind of truth to that, but I want to learn how to control both sides of the Force. There's got to be some sort of a balance there. Is there? Latson asks. I thought you sort of had to choose one way or the other. I'm not sure, you admit. Kylo never would answer me that, but I mean, I guess I could ask Rey, eventually. But she's a Jedi. I don't know if she'd still be comfortable teaching me if I told her I wanted to walk the line between both. Then keep that to yourself for now. You open your mouth to protest, but he keeps talking. As much as you can, anyway. Is it really that easy for her to get inside your head? Fairly, you reply. Then again, I'm not really actively trying to keep any sort of shield up either. Why not? Latson asks, tilting his head to the side. Because, you shrug uncomfortably. Because she's not trying to get in. I don't know, it's just a Force thing. I don't really know how to explain it. Fair enough, Latson sighs. I'll try to figure out as much as I can about the Resistance, and you try to figure out as much as you can about your 3 new friends. They want to be your friend too, you tell him. I mean, you sit there at dinner with them every night too. Yeah, but... Latson shrugs uncomfortably. You know how much fun I am around strangers. You just shake your head. You're cool and aloof, you tell him. You don't say much, but when you talk, everyone stops and listens. He stops and stares at you. That's really how you saw me? Before you started drinking with me, you say simply. And then I saw how much of a whiny piss baby you really were. Uh-huh, okay, that's better, he says with a laugh. Well, it's good to know I haven't lost you completely. You're not going to lose me, you tell him. You're my best friend. Seriously. You've lived with me for the past 5 years now, lad. You're helping raise my son. Like, we're still working on falling into a bit of a rhythm here, but I'm not going to replace you because... Let's face it, you're the only person in this whole freaking place who would actually kick my ass. Latson laughs and shakes his head. I'd ask if you wanted to go, but I'm too tired tonight. Tomorrow, though? Definitely? Definitely, you reply. Besides, it doesn't mean much if Annie isn't here cheering me on. I need a support squad in my corner. Right, Latson says as you both stand up, and you almost jump into his arms as you squeeze him tightly around the middle. Good night, best friend, you say childishly. Good night, you annoying little... You slap him in the arm teasingly before you slip back into your room. As you open your pack to pull out your pajamas, you notice that Kylo's scarves are still tucked away in there, and you realize that last night was the first night you had slept without it in a long time. You take a deep breath in through your nostrils and let it out as you push it to the very bottom of your pack, keeping it out of sight. You had no idea what you wanted to do with it, but for now, you would just keep it out of sight and out of mind. You take a quick shower and change into your pajamas before you sit cross-legged on the bed, resting your hands against your bare knees. You think about Kylo, about the dream you had last night. Was it a vision? It didn't matter. It doesn't matter, you whisper to yourself. You close your eyes and bow your head, trying to focus, trying to draw your own strength into you. My ally is the Force, you tell yourself. It's the only ally I need. You sit there for you don't know how long, concentrating, meditating, reflecting, focusing only on the power situated at your very core. You could be both, you decided, dark and light, drawing your power from both sources. You couldn't deny that Kylo's involvement in your life had been huge for you. You wouldn't be able to simply forget him, simply wish him away, because it was your emotions for him that had allowed you to draw your power in the first place. You would have to accept that part of yourself, accept that part of your past, but yet still be able to embrace the person you could become if you decided to accept the light side as well. I can be both, you whispered to yourself, and you felt like you had finally achieved some sort of clarity on the whole situation. Part of you was bounded to Kylo, truly, but that didn't mean it had to comprise all that you were. You were still free to make your own decisions, your own choices, and you could choose the light side. That choice would always be there for you to make. But I can be both. You say it to yourself again, a strong, verbal confirmation. You could take what Kylo had taught you, and you could take what Rey had taught you, and you could become something truly powerful in your own right. You couldn't follow their paths, of course not. You would have to make your own, but in doing so, you would find strength and the self-reliance you so desperately craved. You were never going to get the answers from anyone but yourself, and you realize that now. They could teach you different things, teach you how to harness different skill elements, but you were never going to be truly whole unless you accepted all the different aspects of yourself, both the light and the dark. Your eyes shoot open suddenly, and you look down to see yourself hovering about a foot off the bed, and your heart thumps in your chest as you realize that you're actually doing it, that you're actually floating in midair. You laugh for a moment, but it breaks your concentration, and you fall backwards onto the bed with a little bounce. Even still, you can't help but smile as you can't wait to tell Rey what happened. She would be proud of you, you knew, but deep down, you knew that shouldn't matter to you. It was nice getting support from other people, but you had to be your own best friend. You had to be proud of yourself. And to tell the truth, you were. The next few weeks went by in a blur. You were well on your way to becoming a reasonably skilled pilot with Poe's help. You were on your way to becoming a pretty sharp marksman with Finn's training, and thanks to your practice with Rey, you could finally levitate yourself in the air now. You had learned some other neat tricks as well, but Rey was also helping you to understand the intuitive powers of the Force, picking up on the emotions and impressions of others in the area, and not just Force sensitives. You can now tell when Ladson was walking down the hall ready to enter your apartment, just by feeling his presence near you. It was indescribable and incredible, all by the same hand. You had also learned about each of them in turn. Poe told you about his past, how he was born to a lieutenant and a sergeant of the Alliance to restore the Republic, and learned about how he had followed in his late mother's footsteps to become a pilot. Finn shared some more details of his time as a stormtrooper back when he was with the First Order, telling you about various training simulations he had gone through and how he had scored top marks as a cadet, although he couldn't bring himself to fire on a group of unarmed villagers. That had been the beginning to the story of how he met Poe, and you heard that story from each of them about 20 times in the weeks that you had first arrived. You had also learned a bit more about Rey's past and heard more of her scavenging adventures during her time on Jakku. Still, you were disappointed that your dinner meetings weren't always regular things. In the beginning, you had assumed that they always sat together all the time, but this apparently was not the case. Sometimes Poe ate with other members of his squadron or other high levels of command, and sometimes Finn ate with other stormtroopers who had also defected from the First Order. Rey was always there, though, and you appreciated her company, especially on days when you trained late and Ladson and Annie had already finished eating. You didn't always talk. Sometimes you just sat in silence as you ate, but it was never awkward. You had started to feel something of a bond to her as well, and although it wasn't anywhere near as strong as the bond you felt for Kylo, you assumed that it could only be expected. After all, she was your teacher now, and although she was younger than you were hardly resentful of it. You knew she had experienced more than anyone should have to go through, but instead of being consumed by her fear, she let the experience help her grow stronger, a clear mark of someone you wanted to imitate. Although you would have liked to, you didn't train with them every day either. You trained with them 3, 4, sometimes 5 times out of a week. Sometimes one of them was busy, off doing something for the resistance, and you just filled in that time hanging out with Ladson and Annie. Sometimes they were gone for only a day, sometimes they were gone for up to a week, but they were never shy about holding back details about what they had done or where they had gone to. Not exactly volunteering information, but answering whatever questions you had. Their candor was something you had never experienced at the First Order, and it was much appreciated. During this time, you took advantage of some alone time with Annie so that Ladson could go off around the base himself, sometimes meeting with Finn and other ex-stormtroopers. You didn't really mind. You spent enough time with him at night anyway, sometimes sparring while Annie looked on, but sometimes you just chatted and talked about your days. Besides, this gave you time to spend with Leia and Annie together. Those times were strange, as they felt almost like family gatherings. You had never met Leia prior to coming to the base, and yet it felt like you had known her for years. You weren't sure if it was because of your relationship to Kylo, or because of the Force, or something else entirely, but you couldn't help trusting her. Annie loved her as well, always running into her arms for hugs as soon as he saw her. She may have been older, but she was still clearly very strong, picking him up in her arms and holding him on one hip as they walked around the room and talked. At nights, though, you were always alone. You had thought about Kylo a few times since, but you tried to keep yourself busy to distract yourself from thoughts of him. You didn't have any more dreams about him since that night, and although part of you still considered it to be a Force vision, you hadn't brought it up to Rey at all. No, the more you thought about it, the more you chalked it up to it just being a dream, a manifestation of your repressed conscience. You refused to think about him during your waking hours, and so it just made good sense that you dreamed about a simpler time when you were together and you didn't know about all the horrible stuff he had done. It made sense, and that theory held. At least until one night. That night really had not seemed quite different from any other as you drifted off to sleep, but almost immediately after you shut your eyes, you were back in that familiar white room with invisible rays of sunlight radiating off the walls. You didn't have much time to process the room, though, as Kylo's lips were on yours in an instant. You moaned as you felt the familiar sensation of his body over yours, and you ran your fingertips along his collarbone, over his shoulders, down the muscles in his upper arms, taking him in, remembering each and every sensation that you thought you had long forgotten. I miss this, you breathed as he pulls away. You can see his dark eyes looking into yours, but for some reason you can't really read his expression as you stroke his cheek. I miss you. And I miss you, he responds in his low voice as he trails his fingertips from your cheek to your neck. He bends down and juts his tongue into the hollow where your jaw meets your neck, and you whimper underneath him as your body fills with need. I wish you were here with me so badly, you murmur as you press your forehead into his, letting the tip of your noses just touch. Then tell me where you are. He nips at your earlobe, and you curl one leg around his as you press your body closer to his. I told you to stay where you were so I could always find you. And you left. I didn't leave, you whisper, although your heart sinks in your chest. But you did. You did leave, and you had gone to a place where he couldn't follow. I went to the resistance base. People came looking for us. I thought Annie and I would be safer there. Kylo just smiles as he runs his lips along the side of your cheek. I can keep you safe, he tells you, lowering his lips to your ear. You can feel his hot breath against the side of your face, and it's so intoxicating. You felt like, in this position, he could talk you into doing whatever he wanted. Take Annie and come to me. I can show you how to find me. He presses his lips to yours again, softly, gently, but you can't help but suddenly feel like this is wrong, all wrong. Your heart is thumping in your chest and you pull back. You get a rush of something, a rush of terror that fills you, and you can see the flash of a forest, green foliage that dots your vision. You can hear the sound of blaster bolts being fired all around you, and you can hear your own shaky breath in your lungs as you run. You're running as fast as you can, trying to get away from him, and that's when you realize that this isn't your memory, this is Rey's memory from when Kylo had hunted her back on Takodana. In your mind, you turn around to face him, but instead of seeing him, you are confronted by a large snake's head that lashes out at you in front of your field of vision. You don't even have time to react, and you see it coming straight for your face before you blink to find yourself back in Kylo's arms. The entire vision lasted for no more than 10 seconds, but you still felt shaken to the core. Kylo himself looks confused and nervous, borderline angry, but you don't know how to respond. You don't know what to say, and the connection breaks. You sit up and literally jump out of the bed, fumbling to get the covers off of your legs as you stand in the middle of the room and rake in deep gasps of air. You suddenly felt too exposed here, too alone, and that's the last thing you want to be right now. You're not sure how early or late it is as you fumble to get into your jumpsuit and you stumble out into the living room, your hands twitching nervously at your sides. You could try to wake up Ladson to talk to him, but that would also run the risk of waking Annie, and you don't want to alarm either of them right now. No, you had a rough idea of who you wanted to talk to. You slip your staff over your head, double check to make sure you still had your key card with you, and head out into the hallway.